Rolling.
Renegades.
Andre and I had this big idea.
Growing.
I had to have the people who didn't believe in me.
Between one day and the next, everything changed.
Nurses know how to solve shit.
Renegades.
Welcome to the RNegade Podcast, a revolutionary approach to continuing education for nurses who don't just do what they're told. We're shining a light on the innovators, the creatives, the renegades, who are blowing up the boxes that the rest of the world is still trying to think outside of. On today's podcast, we have Nathalie Niddam, host of the Longevity Podcast. Her show is a guidepost for those who want to enhance the quality of their lives and extend vitality well into their later years. We're so excited to have her for nurses to not only improve their lives, but the lives of their patients. Nathalie Niddam, I've heard people.
Nathalie Niddam.
Niddam, thank you.
I mean, it could be Niddam, but it's Niddam because I've been saying that way for my whole life. So it has to be Niddam.
Well, then let's go with that.
Okay.
I've already recorded the introduction while I was waiting for you and everything like that.
You did? Okay,
Yeah.
great. That's great because I hate listening to my own intro. So that's perfect.
Yeah. So we could just dive right in. And I'm so excited. But what I love about the introducing somebody whose pod classes, as we call them, are new on the platform is it's just can be a freewheeling because it's like the information then comes through the Trojan horse of your personal story. So I would like for you to kind of just start riffing about who you are and how you got here and why you do what you do, but just start from who you are. And then what was the event that kind of made everything different from one day to the next?
For sure.
That sets you on this path.
There's a couple of those. So first of all, thank you so much. Thank you for including me. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And thank you for inviting me to your platform. Like, it is such an honor.
Oh my gosh.
Be included in this. Like, I can't even tell you, right? I'm like, really? You want me? Oh, that's so cool.
Get out.
And
like cotton candy for my brain.
Hopefully better for you. But basically, I do what I do. And it's funny, like this fire that's within me, this passion. Sometimes people start with like a huge tsunami passion, right?
Yeah.
And my passion it's always been there, but this drive to shine light on new things and shine light on what's out there for people has really it's picked up so much steam over the last 4 years as I myself have discovered, oh my God, like look at everything that's available out there. Look at how limited we've been in terms of the allopathic model, like how it's got blinders on, and through no fault of any of the practitioners in it, really through the fault of the system that's been created to educate them. And we don't need to go into the reasons why the system is the way it is. I'm sure there's lots of good reasons, lots of horrible reasons. But net, we're in a world that is so reductionist when it comes to health.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I think the biggest crime we commit is not giving the body and the person credit for how much we can do to influence our healing.
Amen.
Not to mention all the stuff that's out there that people know nothing about because there is absolutely a suppression, right? The people that are doing the most spectacular work can't really talk about it freely because they get canceled or they get taken off YouTube or they get, and to be fair, there's a lot of fruitcakes around.
There's a dark and a light to everything. So just to give you a little background about why I'm so excited about people like you, like renegades, pioneers, cutting edge. I was a ICU trauma flight nurse for 16 years. And in 2011, I spit myself partially out of the system because I would look around at all these people who kept coming back and they weren't getting better. But people who had a medical professional in their family at least had better outcomes, shorter lengths of stay, because the medical professional knew the questions to ask. They knew how to ask for a second opinion. They knew the standard of care that should be delivered. So I go through the independent RN patient advocacy program because I wanted to start being a private patient advocate. If people didn't have a nurse in the family, they could hire me.
Amazing.
The program I went through was Karen Mercereau, who pioneered the IRNPA program, partnered with the University of Arizona. I thought I was going to learn the business ins and outs of how to be a private patient advocate. And I was very allopathic minded. Everything else was woo to me.
Yeah.
But the business ins and outs and the legalities of being this new profession, this emerging profession in nursing, that was 10% of it. It was all functional, integrative, systems biology, epigenetics, nutrigenomics. And it was like I went in thinking the world was flat and somebody showed me a satellite picture. Yeah. And I got so passionate about, so people would hire me, but I figured out how to think critically and research what's going on around the globe in Europe, in Russia, in Asia, all of the things that we don't have access to here. And I wanted to be a specialist in everything. Yeah. You know, I learned neuroadrenal testing analysis and the wins I had one-to-one with my clients in like 40 years sick, and now they're not. Their kids have been on antidepressant, anti-anxiety, ADHD medicine since they were 7 years old. And now they're off of all of them in 30 days because you figure out the root cause. But I couldn't keep up with how much I wanted to do. So now we're 13 years later and it's evolved into RNegade, and I don't have to be the expert in everything because I can just shine a light on people like you who pick their passion and deliver competently and expansively. And it's so that's my introduction of why I'm excited to shine a light on people.
Well,
like
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful story, and it mirrors mine. Right. Because I'm at the point where, I mean, I was never a nurse, but I was always super interested in science. I was like, and I keep saying this on podcasts lately, like I was the kid that read National Geographic from cover to cover, every freaking episode, and I would stash it. I mean, I was like, my bedroom was a fire hazard at one point because there were so many magazines and all those maps and everything. And it's not just health, right? Like it's the human body, it's nature, it's the world, it's everything. It's the world around us. And I think that we need a global perspective. It's what you just said. Like, we can't just look at what's happening here. We have to look at what's happening everywhere, because there's brilliance and there's tradition and there's wisdom in every corner of the planet. And yet we both because of both because of people's training and because of just not having enough time and enough bandwidth and only being one human, you can only go find so much. You can only be an expert in so many things, right? Yeah. So for me, I've always had that passion for human health. I've always believed deep down inside that the body really had the ability to heal far more than we gave it credit for. I mean, I have my own health journey that started, it's classic C-section baby, 10,000 rounds.
Don't rush through, because this is important. I want everybody to know why you're passionate about what you're passionate. And it is because it was personal for you first.
For sure.
Don't rush through it.
So I was born by emergency C-section after 2 days of labor. My mother was given the choice, it's you or the kid. Ooh. Like that horrible story. She was cut from stem to stern because the guy who did the C-section had no idea what he was doing. Anyway, the good news is we both survived. I carry a scar to this day from that day. But she was never able to nurse. And so we both know that a baby who's born in a traumatic situation, who doesn't get the benefit of mother's milk and is fed formula and then ends up being susceptible. And so then I ended up on like 1 billion rounds of antibiotics over and over and over again. I got pneumonia when I was 1, like so many different things, so that strep became my best friend, right? So I would get strep. If I got sick, I got strep throat. And so by the time I was a teenager, guess what the outcome of all those antibiotics and strep and this and that is? Like candida overgrowth, like it was coming out of my ears. Like it was ridiculous, right? which is probably one of the reasons why I academically never really truly fulfilled my true potential. Like I wanted to go to med school, but my focus was nobody was there to say to me, you know what, Nat, we need to rebalance your microbiome. We need to, I got given whatever courses of fluconazole or whatever that shit is they give you for for candida, but there was no awareness in anywhere that I was about what you really need to do to help someone through this. And I used to talk about how I felt like I developed a leak in my brain,
Mm.
right? And
That's
looking back now, I'm like, wow, like that's insane.
quite illustrative,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And so nevertheless, I went to McGill University in Montreal, which is, it's a pretty prestigious university. I got in, did a bachelor's of science in physiology, which I stopped right before the end, unfortunately, for the worst reasons on the planet. And so then I went on, and the one thing I held on to was I was a fitness instructor my entire life. But I fell into sales because the gift of gab is that thing that makes you a really good salesperson, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of had this corporate career in sales, but I always had my hand in, I was always interested in health and helping people and teaching. And like, hindsight is 2020, you look back and you go like, here are the common threads that have stayed with me my whole life. Right. And it took until, I guess, about 15 years ago, where I'm having a conversation with my chiropractor. And I'd been talking to him a lot about, at the time, like the paleo diet was coming out, and Rob Wolf was really big, and Dave Asprey was just starting with the biohacking and the bulletproof diet. And I'm reading all this stuff and I'm yapping to him. Meanwhile, he's downloading the information to his patients. And he comes in one day and he goes, you know what, Nat, you should be getting paid to do what you do, because I've got like 3 patients who've lost like a ton of weight. They're way less inflamed, like they're way better. And it's literally like a light went off in my head. And I was like, wait, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I went back to school and became I went back to school and became a holistic nutritionist. And the degree, the program that I did was a very intensive in class, back in the day when we still went to in-class programs.
Yeah.
It was a year long. And because my husband had a hip replacement in the middle of it, I ended up extending it by an extra couple of months, just because I had to split my courses up a bit. And that's what really set me on the trajectory that I'm on today. And I remember when I graduated, the talk by the director of the school was, all the stuff that you've learned here, just understand this is your foundation for learning, because now's when the learning begins.
Yeah.
Which is so wise, right? Because any program of education is really only giving you, if it's good, it's giving you the framework and the basis from which to learn and grow and expand. And so from there, I ended up doing the first coach training course that actually was offered by Dave Asprey through Bulletproof at the time. And I remember, like, it was like going back to nutrition school. It was like a spur of the moment decision. And the minute I hit sign up, I was like, what have I just done? Like, did I just spend $5,000 on learning about
the universe moved your bones?
Crazy?
Yeah. Didn't ask your permission. You're just being moved. Yeah.
And it turned out that it was a really, really powerful program on coaching and getting people. And this is when I started to get my first insight beyond, like, as a nutritionist, which I'd been for like a year and a half or whatever. What I noticed is you can tell people what to do till the cows come home. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. Like, there's no shortage of information out there. Our jobs, when we're interfacing with, in my case, clients, or in your audience's case, patients, is how do we help people to get around their story? How do we help to connect people with the why and how this is important to them, and convince them or help them to connect with how powerful they really are and how they are doing this for themselves? Because there's still a very powerful culture of, oh, I have to do this. I can't eat this. I can't do that. And what if we reframe that to, I have the luxury of doing this and I get to eat this and I
Yeah.
get to heal my body, right? Like what if we can reframe that? Help
It's
people to reframe it.
it's so powerful, and especially that people don't understand the consequence of that chronic, insidious, low level hypervigilance for I have to, what if, is that a symptom? Oh, what's wrong with me? My body is not on my side. That all day long, every day creates massive amounts of inflammation. So it almost reinforces your identity of somebody who's fatigued, fat,
Yeah.
sick all the time. And when I've seen in so many cases, when you just switch that, the body is on my side. These things are the body saying, hello, change
Pay
something.
attention.
Yeah. And it's over, instead of getting overwhelmed because there's so much to do to heal. I love what you just said. It's like, I don't need, like, I am the CEO of me,
And so I do think that job one is helping people to connect with that, right?
Yeah.
Helping them to get over the fear because we've become afraid of our bodies, right? We become powerless and we feel that we have to outsource our health.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge is that the best practitioners will tell you, I can't do that. The worst practitioners will tell you, I can fix you.
Yeah.
And it's the reverse of what we've been led to believe. We're all looking for the person who's going to fix us. And anybody who has the arrogance to think they can fix a person, unless you've broken your arm and you need to get it set.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, when in the case of traumatic injuries, let's say getting hit by a bus, getting into a car accident, like breaking something, you do need someone to set that bone so that it heals properly, 100%. But in the case of so many of the things that people are dealing with right now, reclaiming that power of healing and releasing the identity that people, for lots of good reasons, and this isn't critical at all, but releasing the identity of that we've formed around being ill or not working, and then like what you just said, like the language, like this is killing me, or I all of that negative talk.
Even my body won't cooperate with me. I can't trust my body to do that, go there. Yeah.
Yeah. The subconscious is listening, and the subconscious's job is to deliver on what it thinks you want. And if that's the chatter that's happening every single day, that's what's going to get delivered. And I think you've probably seen this as well. Like I've seen people heal from the craziest stuff. And how do they do it? Look at Joe Dispenza's work.
Mm-hmm.
How do people heal from terminal, horrible diseases? Because they change the dialogue. It's not the only thing. And I'm not saying that if you change the dialogue, you will, magically heal from cancer in 3 days. But that has to happen.
It's a foundation. It's a foundation of health. Yeah.
And even if the person doesn't fully heal, they have such a better quality of life. They have they have such a different journey than the person who's stuck.
Yeah. And what I love about your work too is, a lot of times, and I've been accused of this, I've accused myself of this once I woke up to it. Like you just pick, peptide science or one thing. And it's like, there's your hammer. Everything looks like a nail. Mm-hmm. But I love how you've started at, this is the foundation. There's like 10,000 keys that all open the same door, Yeah. And I even the guests that you have on your podcast, they're from they're integrative. Here's my tool, but here's another tool. Here's how they all, synergize together. But it all begins with you. The foundation of health is I am engaged with and I'm in charge of my own healing. And it starts with that. Have you ever read the book, The Physics of God, Joseph Selby?
No, I'm writing it down.
All right. He's got a whole chapter in there. And this is what, first it was, you mentioned Joe Dispenza's work. And so I thought of that to mention that. So You Are the Placebo was the first one I read. And then I went, read all of his books and went to one of his workshops and did all the things. Then I went away And I got down this rabbit hole with like near-death experiences and radical remission, and then I came back to that. And when I came back to Joe Dispenza's work, I found the physics of God, and he has a whole chapter in there. You know, you think like you get to a certain level and then it's like you fall down the stairs and you see a whole nother tower to this building. The whole chapter is devoted to people with, I don't know what they call it now. It's not multiple personality disorder anymore. There's a more, in vogue term for that. But it was talking about how, like, I'm paraphrasing and combining. So I'm just, multiple stories. But there was this one woman say she had like 7 different expressions of personality. One was a heroin addict, and track marks would appear on the arm. One was, anaphylactic allergy to bee stings. And if another personality was expressing, nothing would happen. Same vessel.
Yeah.
But the absolute belief that I am this and not that, how fluid our genetic expression is, upregulation of the allergy gene, downregulation of with the firm belief. One of the personalities had blue eyes and the others had hazel or brown. I mean, physics of God, read it. It'll blow your mind. But it is the intention and the belief that I can. That was a long-winded way of saying that is fundamental, no matter what key of which of the 10,000 keys you're using to open the door to health.
Well, I love you just said that. So there's an episode. I don't know if you picked it for the curriculum, but if you didn't, we have to go back and find it for you. It's a woman by the name of Brandy Gilmore. And I don't know if you've heard of her, but she had her epiphany through studying people with multiple personality. And because she came, so this is a woman who was bedbound from chronic pain, like excruciating chronic pain after a car accident. And she finally had gotten herself into a study where they were going, and she describes this. She goes, so I went in to see the doctor to get into this study, and I had already planned what my life was going to look like, when I was going to be able to walk around, and I was going to be able to get out of bed, and I was going to be able to function again and live again. And I had all these things I was going to do and all this stuff. And he told me that day that I was not eligible. And it was crushing. And so she goes back anyway. So at some point, and I'm not going to go through her whole thing, but at some point she comes across a story of a person with multiple personalities who one personality was blind and the other one wasn't.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, okay, wait, what?
Incredible. Yeah.
Which is actually not even as impressive as one having blue eyes and the other one not, just to be clear, because you could shut down the optic nerve if you had to, I guess. And that's what led her down the path where she literally healed herself. And if you watch her TED Talk, it's chilling. Like it'll give you goosebumps. But the episode that we did together, and she has a program, was, and it's so funny, because your audience doesn't always, I feel like our audience the consumer audience, they don't always get it. And you want to reach out and bonk them over the head and go, no, forget the peptide episode. You need to listen to this one. This is the gold. This is the piece of healing that no peptide can touch, right? Understanding the power of your mind over your physiology and your biology. If we can get our heads around that and own it, it's a complete game changer, and it makes everything else easier. So anyway, so Brandy Gilmore, check out, go find the episode. It's phenomenal. She's amazing. But going back to so I went back, I became a coach, and that was really amazing because it really taught me how to help people to understand their stories and how to overcome their stories, right? The story they had going in their head. And then the next thing that happened is I came across peptides, and that was a rabbit hole that I fell down like Alice in Wonderland. Like I was gone. I remember coming back from the conference I was at and telling my husband about this stuff. And he's like, and at the time, I'd been at it now for 5 or 6 years. I wasn't really, I was okay, but it's nutritionist. It's really hard to get.
Oh, you said as a nutritionist. I'm sorry. I have 3 girls, and they're coming. They're printing, They're coming from all sides on the computer. I'm muting myself so the printer isn't interrupting the sound. And now they're at the door about to open it, and I'm like, I need to have like one of those neon signs, like
Recording.
recording.
Okay.
So you
So
came
as-
back from the conference, peptides, and as a nutritionist, go.
As a nutritionist, it's really hard to build a business. Like or at least it was then. It's maybe a little bit easier now, but even now you're trying to break through the noise. You're trying to stand out the whole 9 yards. Anyway, I come back. My husband's like, Nat, you have shiny object syndrome. Stop it. You know everything you need to know. Just focus on the stuff you know. That's all you need. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay. I was kind of like, okay, because at this point he's like, dude, if you don't start making some money, like,
oh gosh,
you're gonna have to go out and find a job. And I was like, okay, fine. I don't really want to do that.
You
but
had not yet embraced your flakery.
no. Anyway, so at that point, but then it was like this crazy tractor beam, right? Like it was like I couldn't stay away. And then I heard a podcast. I heard the man who ended up becoming my mentor, Jean-François Tremblay. There's a few episodes
that sounds so
with
fancy.
him. Well, it's because it's French.
Well, yeah.
And he turned out to be, he became my mentor in the peptide space. And I heard a podcast with him. He's a French guy. He lived in Quebec. And I did something I've never done before. I emailed him and called him and said, hey, would you talk to me? And he said, yes. And then 2 months after that, I started a Facebook community around peptides. And, that's now about 30,000 people on Facebook, although I'm rarely there anymore just because Meta is not friendly to our kind. And then about a year later, I was working with a coach and she literally, I mean, I'm telling you, Karen, I'm not joking. She literally shoved me off the ledge and forced me to start a podcast. Because I was like, how am I going to get people to talk to me who know more about this stuff than I do? Like, how am I going to really dig into this stuff?
Yeah.
And she's like, dude, you need to start a podcast. Like at this point, I had 5,000 people in my community. We're all learning together. I'm like fast tracking, like doing the research, doing all the things. And so I started the podcast, and that is where, and so already I kind of had this hunger for information. But as the podcast over the last 4 years, I feel like I've matured and grown and expanded to realize that, yeah, peptides are super fantastic. Peptides really move the needle. They're amazing. And by themselves, it's not enough. You need everything. You need to understand, why is the system going sideways? What is the pathway that's involved? What is going wrong? Why is it going wrong? Because what I love about your audience is these are people who understand, if we don't get what's lighting the damn fire, you can put as much fire retardant as you want on it. It's going to come back.
Yeah.
So we gotta get to the source of it.
As a population of healthcare personnel, nurses have the greatest surface area. Yeah. So that's why I when I saw this, my word for God is George. Just George and I, it just feels more like
it.
But when George gave me the idea for RNegade, it was like the whole package came in. Nurses are the white blood cells of the sick system. I mean, you inoculate them with information, and yes, peptides, but all the things, and it improves them, because nurses are not a healthy population.
No, they are because they're.
Yeah.
Well, because you're burning yourselves out. Like nurses I've seen nurses who are healthy, but by and large, their circadian rhythms are trashed. Yeah. They're working in the most unhealthy environments on the planet. They're working stupid hours, and they're caught in a system that doesn't honor them. Yeah. So unless they're very lucky to be working with great doctors, they're getting shat upon from the top. The patients who are not getting the care they need or want or whatever are giving it to them from the other side. Like, I can't believe anybody becomes a nurse.
Yeah. Well, it's, the codependence is strong with these ones. But it takes there's a dark and a light to everything, right?
Sure.
Like it takes some of that, but it's like the old, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. 100%. It's that. And I'm hoping, I want to get a little bit more into peptides, but the other metaphor that I was reminded of, I think I came up with it actually. When I was publishing research, but it's this, you can fill a bucket with peptides and breathing techniques and relaxation and vacations and good nutrition and all that stuff. But if your bucket is leaking, you might fill it up to a point where, but you're always going to be working on filling it. If you don't plug the leaks, like the major, huge leak, like the plug is out of the bucket, is my body is not on my side. My body is against me. If you don't plug that one up, you're just going to be filling the bucket for the rest of your life. But the dirty little secret is you plug up these leaks, the bucket fills itself. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
So
100%.
So can we go back to like, just so that I know you've expanded into so many different things and all these brilliant minds that you talk to, but so we just kind of like have a page 1, chapter 1 about peptides and what was so attractive about that to you. What was it at first?
Well, I mean, the thing that really, really, I mean, they're native to the body. They're fragments of proteins that exist in your body already. The body has receptors for these peptides. You have receptors for BPC 157 all over your body, in every organ, pretty much. And BPC 157, when you take it therapeutically, it upregulates the expression of growth hormone receptors.
Tell
So now
everybody
all
what
of a sudden-
BPC.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so
157. Yeah, these everybody, nurses this could be probably most likely is brand new science to even nurses.
So BPC 157 stands for, and so ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, the names of these compounds are the research chemical names for the most part, because they have not been turned into drugs, because the pharma companies know that they can't make them into a drug unless they modify them. So this is what's happened with semaglutide and tirzepatide, which you might know better as Ozempic and Mounjaro, is these are peptides that have been modified from their natural form to having a much longer half-life, which is what gives us all of the positive benefits, and maybe down the road negative, whatever, but basically they know they need to be able to modify these things so that they can give them a name like Mounjaro, Ozempic, and then charge $1 bajillion for them, right? So BPC 157 stands for Body Protective Compound 157, which I believe stands for amino acid 1 to number 57, because it's a fragment of a much larger protein that is naturally secreted in your gastric juice. Okay. And BPC 157, if we want to talk about a pleiotropic compound, this thing is like rocks. It has anti-inflammatory properties. It has analgesic properties. It has effect on the brain, protective effect on the brain. It helps to restore myelin sheath. It's part of the mechanism of action that can help to restore myelin sheath. It is protective for TBIs. When they took little mice and bashed their poor little brains out, if they gave them BPC 157 beforehand, it protected their brains, which of course explains why the NFL has banned BPC 157. Because why would you want your players to have something on board that could possibly prevent them from developing Swiss cheese brain and going cuckoo down the road? Sorry, that just came out.
No, I'm glad it did. It's like raw. I mean, it's honest. It's true.
So, and as Karen knows firsthand, it is spectacular for healing any tissue in the body, including bones, tendons, ligaments, muscles, you name it. It is there to initiate healing, to support healing. And you accidentally had another compound on board in your event that, unbeknownst to you, was going to amplify the benefits of the BPC 157. Because when you brought BPC 157 on board because of your fracture, you already had these growth hormone receptors that were, well, you had the BPC 157, it increased the expression of the growth hormone receptors. You were taking a growth hormone secretagogue. And so you had extra growth hormones circulating, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, there's all those catcher's mitts over there. Let's go hang out in there.
Yeah.
So, right. So you tapped into a synergistic effect that you didn't even realize at the time.
Yeah. And the TB 500.
That's the other one. So thymus and beta 4. So, okay. So let's finish with BPC, because I'm not even done yet. So BPC 157 also is magical for healing the GI tract. And I'm talking, when I say GI tract, I mean from the mouth to the butthole. There's studies with poor little rabbits or mice or somebody that they induced anal fissures. BPC 157 healed them. And you guys know better than me how horrifying an injury that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how hard it is to heal and the whole 9 yards. I'm forgetting stuff. There's actually, it's GABAergic, dopaminergic, and serotonergic. So it helps to balance neurotransmitters in the brain. Caveat to that. There is a subpopulation of people, and we don't know why, and I couldn't tell you exactly who they are, but there's a subpopulation of people that have a reverse response. They have a paradoxical response to BPC 157. It makes them super angry, depressed. Some of them claim that they stop having feelings.
Like anhedonia.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a very small percentage of people, but they're there. So you have to have an eye on that, because if you let it go too long, it's really hard to reverse, right? It's powerful for wound healing. It's incredible for healing burns. It can be compounded into eye drops and heal the cornea. That's
one.
That's one peptide. Now, it is an exceptional peptide.
Yeah.
Right. The TB500. So, one of the things, peptides are still really the wild, wild west. Right. So a lot of research labs will advertise TB500. What they're actually selling is thymosin beta-4. Thymosin beta-4 is a thymus peptide that is 43 amino acids. I'm pretty positive it's 43 amino acids long. It has 7 docking sites. TB500, I believe, is a fragment of that. The real TB500, which actually was really used on racehorses until they banned it. And it's TB500 and thymosin beta-4 and BPC 157 are both banned by WADA, which is really unfortunate, because all they do is they speed up healing.
Yeah.
Right. That's all they do. They're not androgenic. They're not steroids. They're like none of that. All they do is they increase the body's capacity to heal after injury.
Okay. So I'm going to take you even a little, we're like epilogue. We were doing page 1, chapter 1. Let's go even before that.
Okay.
Peptides, little bit, just for more of a foundation. So a peptide naturally secreted in our body. We have receptors on our cells for every one that exists in nature.
7,000 of them so far.
Okay. They're short chain amino acids, correct?
So a peptide by definition is 50 amino acids or fewer, right? The bioregulator peptides, which is a subcategory, which you guys will find a number of episodes just on bioregulators in my podcast. Bioregulators are a subset of peptides that are 2 to 4 amino acids long.
Okay.
So the peptide that we talk about, so the BPC 157, the thymosin beta-4, thymosin alpha-1, tesamorelin, CJC 1295, these are longer chain peptides. So they're up to 50 amino acids long, and they are all fragments of proteins that are naturally occurring in the body.
Okay.
Okay. And they are signaling molecules. So
the mechanism of action is you have the receptors on the outside of the cell, 7,000 or so. The right key fits into the right lock, and it upregulates or downregulates certain genes.
So it in some cases it affects gene expression, and in many cases it just initiates cascades.
Okay.
Cellular cascades, right? And so the bioregulator peptides, and these are straight from Russia with love, with or without love, and they're based on over 30 years of research. So make no mistake, the bioregulator science in Russia is real. And they use those things after Chernobyl to help their population to heal. Because what the bioregulator does, so it's a tiny 2 to 4 amino acid peptide, like 2 to 4 amino acid chain that is arranged in a very specific 3D configuration with very specific charges on different molecules and whatnot. Those little babies get across the cell membrane, they cross it through the nuclear membrane, and they have a docking position on DNA. And they do affect genetic expression. And they do affect the ability of DNA to express itself positively. So Those guys are the ultimate epigenetic switches. They are also naturally occurring in the body, but like all good things, we make fewer of them as we age. And you've got all these other things going on that overwhelm the body's ability, if you will, to benefit from them. And so Professor Cavinson, who's the dude that did all the research and the studies and all the things, he talks about how we all every
Is this a
newborn-
Russian
Yeah.
researcher?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the sources at the end of this.
So he tragically passed away in January.
Well,
just-
he has published research.
Like, you won't believe how much published research there is on this
Okay.
guy.
I'll link to a couple of
The
them.
bad news is that a lot of it's in Russian. So if
Mhm.
anybody's listening who speaks Russian, you've got such a head start on everybody else because the Russians are not the most forthcoming people on the planet. So there's a certain amount of stuff that's been translating and then a whole bunch of other stuff that hasn't. So the people who are really good at Google Translate and or who have a Russian friend, way ahead of the game from everybody else. But he talks about how so he noticed initially when he started his research, he noticed that these bioregulator peptide sequences are preserved across all species of life. And so we both know, and I'm not a researcher scientist, but I know enough to know that when a researcher scientist finds something that's preserved across all species, they're like, this must be awfully important if Mother Nature
Yeah.
decided that everything needs it.
And if you need any more evidence, we think of ourselves like man apart from nature, not man as part of nature. And there you have it. There is a biochemical evidence that, we are all
one and the same.
So we are all one.
We're all one. We have different energies maybe, but we're all one and the same. So
little cliche necessary here. We are all. Yeah.
So when it came time for him to do his studies and to think about reintroducing these bioregulators into, he started with animal studies and then he went into animal studies. He did a lot of even computer modeling at the time, even without AI. And then he did his human studies. Why? Because at that time, Russia was a big freaking deal. They had deep, deep, deep pockets. He was a military physician. His mission was really to help heal soldiers. And as Bill Lawrence says, who's the guy that I interviewed on all this stuff, when the military is doing research on something, it's a good idea to pay attention because they're throwing all kinds of stuff at it. And this young corporal medical doctor was thrown a blank checkbook and told, we have factories full of people that you can run whatever you need to do on, right? So the good news is it was all very ethical. When he did his studies, his old people studies, which is the ones that really get people's attention first, he had a group of over 200, I believe they were like 55 to 75-year-olds, right? And he studied them for 12 years. And half the control group got injections of polyvitamins, right?
Mm-hmm.
The test subjects got injections of epithalamin, which is the animal extract of the pineal gland bioregulator.
Ooh.
So the pineal gland, like think about what you guys know from med school about the pineal gland. We know that the pineal gland regulates circadian rhythm. We know that it regulates melatonin production. We know that it is the master endocrine regulator of the body. And we may or may not know, because, conventional medicine doesn't talk about this much, it also helps to activate telomerase, which is the enzyme that restores and preserves the length of telomeres on the ends of DNA. So on that basis alone, if we can positively influence the pineal gland, it's a really good thing. Not to mention the fact that the pineal gland also has a massive influence on the immune system. So group number 1 got their polyvitamins. Group number 2 got their pineal gland, their epithalamin injection. And remember that name because it's important. And these were intramuscular injections, and they only got the injections, I think, for 2 or 3 years. At the end of 6 years, the group that was getting the epithalamin had a significantly reduced mortality rate than the other group.
How significant?
Like 30%.
Oh.
And maybe maybe at the end it was 30%. I'll get you guys it's all in the podcast. Okay. So
no. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And,
But-
and
I can actually dig up the data if you want to put it in the show notes. And then at the end of 12 years, it was half.
oh my gosh.
No, it wasn't. Half was the next study, but it was dramatic, right? Like at the end of 12 years, it was maybe 30%. But the more important thing is that those people that got the epithalamin had a better reported quality of life. They had better bone density. They had better immune function. They slept better. Shocker. They had better melatonin production.
Yeah.
Right? It restores
Pineal gland.
melatonin
Mhm.
production. And they were generally healthier than the suckers who got the vitamins. So then he decided, okay, let's up the ante. Let's take a group of like really old people, like 75 to 85-year-olds. And we're only going to follow them for 6 years because we don't expect them to live that long anyway, because these are not people living in the lap of
Right.
luxury kind of thing. So we have our polyvitamin group. We have our group that got the epithalamin. And then we get a group that got epithalamin and thymolin. Epithalamin is the pineal gland bioregulator. Thymolin is the thymus gland bioregulator. And you ladies and
What's gonna
gentlemen
happen
all
next?
know, you guys all know what takes us out. It's a dysfunctional immune system. Whether it's underperforming, overperforming, or just going sideways,
Yeah.
immune function is king when it comes to longevity and health span. Now we get to the results of the epithalamin group had like 88% of the control group were done, where they were dead after 6 years. There was a 33% reduction in mortality in the epithalamin group. There was there was like half the mortality.
And they started old. Oh my gosh.
So here's the interesting thing about bioregulators. Bioregulators seek to restore homeostasis. And this is really important to understand. So if we use a bioregulator, it doesn't mean it's going to make our pineal gland superhuman. But if we're old and we use the pineal gland bioregulator, it's going to turn the clock back for us to middle age. And so in many ways, using the pineal gland bioregulator before you're old is a great idea because it stops the progression to some degree. It's a little bit like restoring the tread on your tires,
Mhm.
right? But for an elderly person, it can help to bring them back.
Whew.
So an elderly can be 60 or 70, right? I mean, the line on elderly, I find, moves
just
as we
started
get
my-
older.
My dad, he was complaining about shoulder pain for,
Yeah.
just generic, like get
Eh.
progressive arthritic kind of thing, where he was losing his grip strength and everything. And he's a highly decorated naval veteran with a couple Bronze Stars and whatever. And he
Nice.
loves to keep logs. He's got a log about how long the candle next to my mom's photo lasts. And like when he found the
He's like an
longest
engineer.
lasting.
Yeah.
He was an engineer. And then he's got one about how his antique clock, how long it'll swing with each. And so I gave him the BPC 157 TB 500 combination. I sent it to him, and now he loves to inject. Like he feels so empowered because he doesn't
He's
have to
poking
just
himself
sit
with
here, and
needles.
he's
Yeah.
poking himself, and he's like, "What else you got for me?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna look that
Well,
up.
those two are the gateway drug, right? Because
Yeah.
the magic of BPC 157 is that sometimes, and we often say, look, we will often, as a coach, I would used to say to people, look, if you can't change your diet and mattify your sleep and move more and this and that, I'm not even going to start working with you, right? The problem is that when someone has really severe dysfunctional gut issues and they're not sleeping and they're in pain and the whole 9 yards, they don't have the energy to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're feeling so awful. They're feeling pretty hopeless. The beauty of something like BPC 157 and very often the Thymus peptide is that it helps them to feel better. They see light. They have hope. They're like, oh my God, like my digestion's better, or that knee pain went away, or my back doesn't hurt as much. And now all of a sudden they're like, okay, like you're done. Well, what's the next thing? What
Yeah,
else?
and my doctor never gave me anything like this. And I did this myself. It was my own choice, my own treatments, self-care,
I did it to
self-treatment.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go to the experts for it.
Yeah.
Just
Well, the expert is
daughter that
becoming
every
me.
once in a while he'll buy what she says.
Well, he'll
All right.
buy more. Believe me. Like I did it with my parents, and now they're like, okay, now what?
Yeah. Well, that's how I am. It's so empowering, and I always say I love to play with myself. Like I love to I love to find new science about new something and then try for 30 days. I won't do anything that I don't feel a difference for 30 days, because I used to be like those, the people who just go to Whole Foods and they've got their pill boxes and they look, like anybody who's overdoing the George's job, there's too much to know. But the farther back you can, it's not, instead of doing whack-a-mole with pharmaceuticals or supplements, getting down to the cellular level and getting the energy to then change your diet, change your lifestyle. And, but when you feel like when you've been operating at 20%, and that's just what it feels like to be Karen, and then all of a sudden you bump up to 30%, and it's like, oh my gosh, I was sick. Like I was exhausted. I wasn't living.
Yeah. I often say you don't realize how sick you were until you feel better, right?
Yes.
Because people normalize feeling sick. We have to survive, right?
Yes.
It's a survival mechanism. You normalize it so that you don't walk around, kind of completely focused on it. I mean, some people do, but a lot of people don't. They just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And when you help them to feel a little bit better, all of a sudden they start to realize, holy jumping, just like you just said, like, I can't believe how I was feeling and how much better I can feel. So one other thing I want to say about TB500, and then I want to move to, if you don't mind, I want to move to a different topic. For TB500 and thymosin beta 4, which often, as I was saying, get interchanged. One thing to know about those guys is there's a fragment of that. What I was saying is for thymosin beta 4, there are 7 different docking stations on this one peptide. Remember, I said it's 43 amino acids. It's a big, from a peptide perspective. Obviously, from a protein perspective, it's not that big, because proteins can be like hundreds and thousands of amino acids and folded up into origami so that they do what they do. With thymosin beta 4, you have 7 docking stations. One of those fragments is a mast cell destabilizer. And so there is a portion of the population, including yours truly over here, who has major histamine responses to thymosin beta 4. And TB500. So just a word of warning to everyone, just to be mindful if you decide you're going to move into using these in practice with your patients or whatever you end up doing, or using it yourself, for example, start low and be mindful for the mosquito bites that show up. You might think that you have bed bugs. You might think that there's a spider that made it under your t-shirt, and you will eventually start to connect the dots and realize, like, oh, look, those itchy little bumps seem to correlate awfully closely with my injection sites.
Yeah. Good to know.
And sometimes the immune system will back down and give up the fight. And other times, in people like me, the immune system just gets angrier and angrier and angrier, so that we end up with giant hot red balls under the skin. And that is, like you said earlier, that is a sign and a message from the body: cease and desist right now, or I'm really going to get mad. So, there's a narrative out in the world by people who I will not name, that nothing could possibly go wrong with peptides, that they're completely natural, that they're recognized by your body, that, there's no downside. Bullshit. There's downside to everything, right? And people can be sensitive to things. People can have histamine reactions. People may not tolerate a peptide because it's not the right thing for them right now, or because their immune system is in such a state of hypervigilance that it will not accept anything coming in of that sort. So for me, I can't do any growth hormone secretagogue, and I can't touch thymosin beta 4, which broke my heart, to be clear, because I was able to use a stack of BPC 157, thymosin beta 4, and CJC ipamorelin, which are 2 growth hormone secretagogues, for over, I think it was a month or 6 weeks before my body really got mad.
Hmm.
And I was doing CrossFit at the time, and there was no way for me to get sore. I recovered so freaking well from my workouts. It was ridiculous until my body threw up the blocks and said, no, we're
That's
not doing
enough.
That's enough. So I can use BPC 157, but I can't use the others. So the other area that I think is going to be so valuable to your audience, because I think this is another next frontier in medicine, and before medicine, it's going to be this space of medicine, and that's testing. The things we can test for, and the degree of testing that's happening right now is just astounding. So I just released a podcast not too long ago with a company called MeScreen. MeScreen tests mitochondrial function. Like, imagine that you do not have to punch a muscle biopsy out of somebody's quad to understand how their mitochondria are functioning. You can do it with a blood spot test. Right? Another company that is doing like stupendous work is a company called Theriome, and they have the Aristotle test. The Aristotle test looks at the entire metabolome, and they will report back to you they will overlay your genetics over what they see in your blood and talk to you about what are the supplements that you're taking that are working for you? What are the deficiencies that you have? What pathways are blocked that are making it that you can't process certain supplements? What's your nutritional status at a micronutrient level? Like, that test is next level. And they report back on like 12 different areas of function, including your mitochondrial function. And they are actually partnering with MeScreen, the mitochondrial guys. There's another test coming down the pipes that can detect cancer cells that are released before there's even a tumor in existence, right? In the blood.
Do you know what the test is called, or what the company that has a test is called?
I forget, because I just
Okay.
met them, but there'll be a podcast coming out momentarily. There's another
Good
test
teaser.
that I just heard about from a doctor who works in the breast cancer space. Did you know that women secrete 2 proteins in their tears when they have breast cancer?
No.
And so there's a test called the AURIA test, AURIA. And that test, you take a piece of paper, you stick it in your eye, it takes a sample of your tears, you send it to the lab, and they go looking for those 2 proteins.
Oh, George, love him. Oh,
Right?
man. Yeah.
What was the other one? And
instead of like smashing the boob, irradiating it, and then hoping you don't get cancer.
So that podcast hasn't even come out yet, but she talks about, she now has a new screening tool that she's now opening clinics all over the US. It's called QT something. I'll get it for you for the show notes. And what they do is they do sound imaging through water to recreate the breast tissue, and it gets through dense tissue. Because how many women do you know haven't been told you have dense breasts, but we're going to squish it harder anyway and irradiate it harder anyway, even though we're not actually going to be able to get an answer? And she talks about how some idiotic percentage of women are misdiagnosed with breast cancer every year in the US, and they're treated for breast cancer, and they're told they have breast cancer. So now they walk around, we were talking about the power of the mind. They walk around believing that they have breast cancer, never mind the fact that they're subjected to the toxicity of the treatment unnecessarily.
Yeah. And so it's toxicity of the nocebo and the toxicity of the chemistry to get rid of the non-existent disease.
Or exactly, like the whatever it is that they detected that to her point never would have evolved, right? So in her practice, if there's imaging shows that there's something there, she's going to watch it for 30 to 60 days for doubling, right? For how fast are the cells replicating, and if they're replicating, she'll intervene. But if they're not, if it's just sitting there inert,
Yeah.
Why are you going to put someone through chemo and radiation and destroy their immune system
Well,
so that 10 years down the road, they're going to now they're going to get blood cancer or some other kind of cancer.
which brings us to a good place to kind of tie things up.
Yes. Because we could keep going for
and for nurses listening to this podcast, which was meant to be just an introduction, but now definitely we've hit on a lot of points. This is totally worth. This is CE worthy for sure. But Natalie's podcast, what's the name of your podcast?
It's Longevity with Nathalie Niddam.
Longevity. You will see, I think it's it's like a white background with red lettering. As soon as you see that, click on them and devour them. You will learn so much evidence-based stuff that we do not have access to that is helping millions, will help you, and you get CE credit for listening to it. Now, the question I want to ask you, what is an evidence in your experience? What is an evidence-based reason why? I know the conspiratorial ones that I have too.
I don't do conspiracies.
Right. What is the evidence-based reason why this information doesn't get to, the general population, even the medical profession?
Well, for the medical profession, I think that by and large, I think a couple of things. I think number one is that curiosity gets crushed out of people in med school.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
If you come out
algorithm.
of med
Yeah.
school, if you come out of med school with any degree of curiosity still alive in you, you're exceptional. Right. And then once people are in practice, they don't have the bandwidth. And then you have a portion of the population, not to be, there's good doctors and bad doctors. There's doctors who learn what they learn. They're not interested in learning anything else. And they're like, this is what I learned in med school. This is what I'm going to do. This is evidence-based. People hide behind evidence-based.
Yes. Yeah.
And anybody knows that whatever's being taught in med schools today is like, what is it, 17, 20 years behind what we actually know, like the learning that we've done. Like, how is it possible that people in this field that is the most exciting, most fast-moving field out there don't just want to say, like, what's new? That have come out. So in some cases they don't want to know, but in most cases I think they just don't have the bandwidth, and the medical colleges don't help them, right? Because in a proper system, the medical college would say, look, we're going to have a system that synthesizes everything that's new, and once every 3 months, 6 months, whatever, fill in the blank, we're going to bring you a synopsis of the new stuff. Now, in theory, that's what journals do, and but the colleges, not only do they not bring the new information forward, but they punish people that move too fast on the new information. It's a punitive system, right?
Well,
how many doctors do you know get called out as quacks because they've moved into a different direction?
Yes, which is why that there is almost like a parallel healthcare system that is emerging to run alongside the disease care model, which there are positives to that. Like you said, broken bones, blunt force trauma.
Sometimes you need antibiotics.
Yeah, there is. But we are shining a light on the parallel true healthcare system. And we are so excited for you to be part of the RNegade platform for nurses, the white blood cells of the system.
You guys
to
are
get
the best.
Inoculated with your podcast, your information, and all your guests. Like I have like a list of 5 I'm going to go listen to right now.
Well, thank you. I mean, there's a lot there. Take your time and apply your critical thinking. Everything's not going to be for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So know that there's a lot there. Everything's not going to resonate with every single person, but please do not ignore what we talked about earlier on, which is the spiritual side, the mind side, the power of our minds, of the power of the individual and of this body to, when we release the blocks, when we release the traumas, when we release the stories, there's a lot of healing that can take place. I'll leave you with one last thing, which is there's a book. If people aren't familiar with it, it's a book swap. You gave me The Physics of God. The next one is going to be The Body Keeps the Score, which I'm sure you're familiar
I've
with.
heard of that. Yeah, that's on my list. It's actually on my Audible.
It's
thing.
it's such an important book. There's The Body Keeps the Score and The Biology of Belief. Those two books they should be 101 required reading for anybody in the health space.
Yeah, and Anino Morjani, Dying to Be Me. That changed my life. I was going around to corporations. I called it the broccoli dialogue, and like fear mongering. If you eat this, you're poisoning yourself, and if you don't eat, whatever. And I mean, like, just over, because I was new to the integrative space, and I was just like, right, clean out the cabinets, nothing toxic, whatever. And I'm telling my kids, when they'd eat Doritos, they'd sneak, their dad would bring them home, and I'm like, you're poisoning yourself. And then I read The Biology of Belief and You Are the Placebo. I'm like, oh my God, I am poisoning my kids by inducing the belief that they're poisoning themselves.
Well, not that they should be eating Doritos. Let's be clear.
No, but even worse is the belief.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Sure. Well, listen, I mean, this is how we have 90-year-olds and even centenarians who were smokers and drinkers.
Yeah.
Right.
And loneliness is more inflammatory than smoking in many cases. And they, you tell them to drop those 20 friends in a box and they're dead 6 months later. I've seen that time and time again.
Because,
you just said there's no clarity in science, because that's like I'm going to say that again.
There's no clarity in science. We were just talking about metformin, for example, right? Or rapamycin. These are medications. I mean, rapamycin, for crying out loud, it's a cancer drug. Metformin is a diabetes drug. These are drugs that have been repurposed at low dose for longevity purposes. But within the longevity community, you have people fighting about this all the time. Yeah. Is it doing more good than harm? Is it doing more harm than good? And so for you guys who are so educated and are critical thinkers, you will end up having to form your own opinion about this. And then you will clinically apply it and you will witness what happens. And that's when the magic will happen.
That's curiosity is the superpower. Nurse critical thinking and curiosity are nurses' superpowers. And just as a bonus recommendation, it was Elizabeth Yerth, one of Nat's podcasts on repurposed drugs. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's the most recent one. So I think it's it's from 2024. I would say in the third quarter, probably.
Okay,
is when it came out.
Well, there's so much to be learned. There's so much we don't understand. And I love how you stress that the spiritual side, the belief is foundational, that your body is actually always on your side.
100%.
Thank you for
so
that.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank
it was
you.
So good to have you. I'm so excited for everyone. Go
Renegades.